Hello, sisters, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. It's time to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy my conversation with Mary Cecchini as she shares about the group travel that she leads for solo women travelers.
Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean Go Solo Live? Have you ever been asked, why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Joining me today is Mary Cecchini. Welcome, Mary.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So where are you at right now? Where is home base for you?
Home base is in Portland, Oregon. Although I'm not here that often, but here at the moment and enjoying it.
And when you're not there, what do people typically find you doing?
Well, when I'm not home, you can find me kind of all over the world. So I started a business called Living Big Travel about 4 years ago. And through the business, I host small groups of women on trips all over the world, domestically, internationally. And so you'll either find me out hosting a trip or researching the next destination.
Awesome. That sounds like a good job to have. What inspired you to get started in this work?
Well, it started actually way back, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. My background is actually in corporate marketing. I was a brand marketing manager for a large consumer product company. And to be honest, I was so burnt out. I was traveling like a lot, but to places like Sacramento and Boise. I mean, no offense, Sacramento and Boise, but not quite the travel that I really was excited about. I was super burnt out. I was working crazy hours. And then a whole slew of other things happened. Like, to be honest, I had a crazy breakup. The most significant thing is my mom actually got very sick. She had a brain aneurysm, and spoiler alert, she's great. She's fine. She's thriving. But it was really kind of all of those things coming together going, I don't think this is really what I want to do with my life. Like, I just kind of had this existential moment. And so in that time, and even to this day, I often look to travel as a place of solace. And so I made a plan that in 1 year's time, I was going to quit my job and go travel and create some space for myself to figure out what was next. What was my next season going to look like? And while I was traveling on this trip, I kept a blog, and I would often write about where I was going, what I was seeing, and how I was getting there. And I started hearing from all these women that would respond either on the blog or on social media. And they'd say, like, how are you getting there? And how do you find it? And oh my gosh, I wish I had the courage to go on my own. And, I'd hear all these comments and questions. And so when I came back from this trip, I had a number of things that I tested that might be a part of my next season of life. And one of the things I tested was hosting trips for women to really answer the need that I saw in all those questions and comments. And so I tested a trip. My first trip was to Costa Rica, and I loved it. I immediately felt the energy that I got from kind of not only recreating my favorite experiences, but enabling travel for so many women.
That sounds amazing. And I'm curious, and I'm going to guess the answer is no, which is completely fine. But you didn't read my book, did you?
I haven't yet.
That's okay.
Haven't yet.
The reason why I bring it up is your way of describing what that trip was for you is exactly how I share my story. You bet. So,
oh my gosh, I can't wait to read it. Okay, I'm going to put it on. We
both have found, so just in case anybody's listening and they're not familiar, the book is called Go Solo, A Savvy Woman's Guide to Transformation and Self-Discovery Through Travel, and you can find it on Amazon. But I don't normally plug my book on the show because I'm really more about your story. But the fact that I'm talking about intention and purpose and writing the next chapter of your life and looking for seeking that to come to you from out in the universe totally resonates with me.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought it up because I've found that sometimes when I share that story, I get a lot of emails and questions about like, how do I do it? And I'm always get a little uncomfortable because it's so much a personal journey, and I am savvy as heck when it comes to travel, but not that life coach for someone. So I'm grateful for people like you who write amazing resources like your book to answer the calls and help people figure out kind of how they can use travel to be their own tool to figure out what's next in their life.
Absolutely.
Yay.
That's exciting. So you kind of talked about then, okay, you got back and you started to find a way to do this for others, to help others embrace that wanderlust and solo travel spirit. But what were your biggest discoveries while you were traveling?
Oh my gosh. Well, when I was traveling on my own, well, on that trip, I was gone for about 5 months, and it was I had highs, super highs and low lows. And I think some of the biggest ahas was that, number one, I could be my own best friend. It took a little while to find comfort sitting at the bar on my own, navigating a city when I don't really know what there is to do, like dealing with like the weird emotion. I'm sure you relate to this moment of like, I'm here and this is cool and everyone in my world thinks it's cool, but why am I sad? Like it took me, I worked through a lot of those emotions, and I worked through like how to transition from being this like kind of corporate junkie that thrives off, email, being busy and I'm on the go and I'm super important and I have these big titles, to like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I'm not really sure. And it took me a little while to find comfort with not knowing the answer and just letting that process be the process. I didn't, just to, diminish any like romantic notions of like, I had this aha moment, came home with a business plan. That was not it. Like I definitely had to give myself some grace to not have that pressure. But what, for me, like the biggest thing that came out of that trip was that I came home with like really what I sometimes describe as like a compass for what was important to be a part of my next season. So I knew that I wanted to have, I wanted to create space and flexibility to support my family. Like I mentioned my mom was sick. I remember having to take conference calls in the hospital, and like it was always weighing on my mind, all these deadlines I was missing. And that's a terrible feeling. Like I couldn't just be like all in. Not to say that, there's a perfect job, you can just forget about life, but I wanted to have more flexibility. I also knew that I wanted to find a way for travel to be a part of my world. That had always been a source of curiosity and exploration. And so I wanted more of that to show up in my daily life, more than like my corporate job gave me with 2 weeks vacation. And then the third thing I knew was that I wanted to find a way to serve my community. I think because of that sheer shock of almost losing my mom, I had like those thoughts of like, oh my God, what if like tomorrow it's my last day? Like no one's going to sit at my funeral and talk about how like I nailed it at that presentation, or that, research report just was stellar. Like people don't care about that. And so like I knew that I wanted something to meaningful. And so really those 3 things are really the tools I use to start shopping, different things I could test to do professionally and make money and, continue living.
I like to use the phrase when we travel to give ourselves a little grace and a little space.
Yes, it's such truth to that. Such truth.
So you're resonating again, along with so much of what I believe in. As you've learned those lessons and you gave yourself the grace and you gave yourself the space to let what was supposed to be coming next for you come to you. What were some of the things happening in the travels that you were doing that were helping you to do that exploration?
Well, I think I met a lot of people that had non-traditional jobs, and that was really freeing for me to see that, I would check into a hostel, and I think the perception in mind was if you're in a hostel, you were like 21 and backpacking and living on $8 a day, and which not to say it doesn't exist, but also like there were professional women taking, month-long sabbaticals. There were women I met in the hostel that have, families and careers at home, and they're just taking time out for themselves. That I would meet a lot of people on professional sabbaticals or people who are working remotely. And like, I guess, and it seems silly now, but like, I guess I just didn't think that was a possibility. And so it really freed me up to look at different ways of what work can be.
But that's exactly it. We're not exposed to that. And that's the whole reason for you doing the work that you do and me sharing stories on the podcast, because especially American women are, for a variety of reasons, including health insurance coverage and fears and other things, we're not necessarily encouraged to go do that solo travel.
Totally.
And so to go to a place where then you're seeing, oh, wait, I'm not so weird. This is sort of normal for some people in some situations.
Absolutely.
It can be a real game changer.
It was huge. And, it took a long time for me to find comfort in that, but then it took even longer, to be honest, with some of my family to find comfort with that. I mean, I still think there's days my grandpa doesn't really know how I survive. I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I talk to him, he's like, you're leaving again. And it's like, well, this is my business stuff. But I think it just, the power of finding alternative ways to do all of the things that, maybe are important or someone thinks are a part of success. Like I can still contribute to retirement. I can still pay for health insurance. I can still dental insurance. I can still, I can still do all those things. It just comes in different forms. And it takes a little creativity because you're right. There aren't a lot of influences. It's not a prevalent part of like our culture, ways of working. So it took a little while to get there, but I'm there. It's just, I should say I'm working there every day.
Right? Well, and what's interesting too is, as we grow, our definition of success continues to evolve.
Totally.
But I find it really important to remind everybody that the only person whose measuring stick really matters is your own.
Absolutely.
And I that was one of my ranting blog posts at one point, is especially as an entrepreneur, is don't use your stick of how you measure success to then impose that definition onto me. Mm-hmm. I may not measure the same thing. I may not value the same things you do.
Yeah, absolutely. A mentor of mine, her name is Susan Clark, and she runs this amazing program called HeartSpark that really changed my life. And I remember one day she said to me, she goes, Mary, you get to decide what your everyday looks like. And even though that's such a simple statement, that had a huge shift in my mind to how I approached what my everyday looked like. Like I don't have to go to a work environment or a job that doesn't bring me joy. Like I don't have to continue to climb this ladder that I'm not sure really brings like my success patterns to life. And so there was a huge ripple effect from that, but it was a big unlock for me to figure out kind of what my true path was going to look like for this season of life.
I also think that there's something to be said for judgment about, well, if you travel, then you must. So if you travel, then you must not value security. If you travel, then you must not really work a real job, and it's funny because when you have the conversation with people to say, or we just have different priorities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it can be this eye-opening thing of just, it's okay. Maybe we can't have both. Maybe people can have it all. But, there's those folks who are saying, well, I wish I could, but this is, then you've made choices that that are saying that you value a Starbucks coffee every day.
Yeah.
Versus walking away at the end of the year with $1,000 that you could use towards a trip.
Mm-hmm. And I have that conversation a lot certainly with clients or people who want to be clients, go on trips. How do I save for travel? And I also have it with people who are aspiring entrepreneurs. And I'll often say, like, you have to want it. You have to want it really bad. You have to want this business more than you want that Starbucks. You have to want that airline ticket more than you want that new pair of sunglasses. And it's not a criticism. It's just, if you say you want it, then let's figure out how to get there. And it's going to require those priorities and prioritization that you mentioned. You got to decide what's important to you right now. And it could change. It could evolve. Like, a mortgage and a vacation home could become a higher priority in the future for me than it is right now. And I get to choose what those days look like. So I get to choose when that's a higher priority for me.
That's exactly it. But working in a way that that you get to make those choices rather than feeling that there's only this one standard path to take. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, if we talk about what is the age group of women that you work with for the most part?
I would say the women that go on my trips or hire me to plan their travels are between probably 35 and maybe 60. But, there's huge swings even on each trip. So I'm heading to Thailand in a few weeks. I think the youngest is 23 and I think the oldest is 66. And that's pretty normal to have a swing like that.
That is incredible. And how many people are you taking with you on that trip?
To Thailand, there will be 12 women on that trip. So the average group size is probably between 8 and 12. That
is fantastic. So it's interesting when you are doing cross-generational travel, the opportunities for learning that come from that as well.
Huge. It's actually one of my favorite things about hosting these trips. It's not something I necessarily anticipated even being a part of the process. And it's that on a trip, you get to the experience to view the world through a lens that another woman has. Because there are women on these trips that, as I just mentioned, just finishing college, starting your career to retiring. Some have children, some don't. Some are married, some aren't. Some are on second, third marriages. Some are exploring alternative, cultures and lifestyles and different stages of their professional journey. And to be able to kind of step into that woman's shoes for a week or 2 weeks, or maybe a longer term friendship it's a really amazing thing, because I think it's a reminder that there are different ways of living. There are different ways of organizing family, different ways of organizing your career. And, I don't fault people for, not doing that, on a regular basis, because we're human, we're humans. Like, we are creatures of habit. We generally surround ourselves with like-minded people. But, when you have that chance to kind of stretch yourself outside of what's normal for you, there's a lot of cool moments of growth and learning that happen. And I just find that most of the women on these trips, when they come and get to experience and learn, they leave far better because of it. Far more understanding and empathetic. And dare I say, I think has the potential to change the world if more women are continue to find ways to be empathetic to the women all over the world and how we all live.
I completely agree. I think that's so important and so valuable. The interesting thing that I find is, in companies now, there's all sorts of managing up or mentoring up,
Mm-hmm.
as well as mentoring, down in the traditional manner. And these types of trips, a 66-year-old may very easily have a 23-year-old grandchild.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they're having the same kind of conversations with their grandchildren, or there's parts about their grandchildren that they might not really understand.
Mm-hmm.
And this does create that opportunity for understanding in really a non-committal type of environment.
Yeah. Exactly. One of my favorite stories, I think I might have been in Croatia a couple of years ago, and I kind of caught wind of this conversation happening at the other end of the dinner table. And it was a woman maybe in her 30s and a woman maybe in her late 50s or 60s, talking about online dating. And it was the funniest conversation, because even though they had about 3 decades between them, there are certain things that have not changed in their minds about dating men. And so just watching them kind of open up the phone and swiping left or swiping right and talking about first dates, whether they were in the 60s or they were 6 months ago, it was just so funny to see them kind of share the common bonds of like, oh, dating. Yep, all been there, even though the medium is drastically different.
That is pretty phenomenal. And again, it's great, because what you're looking for at that point is by our very nature, we start out by seeing our differences.
Mm-hmm.
Our brain categorizes things of, this person is like me in this way and not like me in this way. And that's just kind of the way that the brain works. And then you start conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and you start to say, oh, maybe we're more alike than we ever would have expected.
Absolutely. I tell actually all my clients that before they arrive and almost right when they arrive that, there will be things you do on this trip that are your absolute favorite. And there's going to be some things that maybe you enjoy, but not as much. And the same thing about that, the same dynamic will exist with people, and that's normal. But if you can approach every engagement from a place of curiosity, you're going to be far happier, and you're probably going to be you'll gain a lot more from the experience than if you just look at only what you have that's different.
Well, and let's talk about this idea of solo group travel,
Mm-hmm.
because I share a more broad definition of solo travel. There are some people and some organizations that exist with a very narrow, strict definition of solo travel, which involves something like you go alone, you plan it yourself, you're there exploring on your own, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily really even meeting up with friends or things like that. There was once a gentleman who asked, well, if you're traveling solo, why are you interacting with like locals? Are you kidding? Like, that's like the narrowest definition
Wow.
I've ever heard. I'm like, it's not solitude.
Yeah.
We're not confined. So
It's a
my
spectrum.
definition of solo travel has a lot more to do with, you're just not taking your parent, your sibling, your child, your friend, nobody close to you is going. Therefore, you have your own interests in mind as you're doing this travel, not necessarily having to be caretakers of others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How would you describe your version of what solo travel is, especially for the people who are coming on trips with you?
Yeah, you know what? I think you make a good point about illustrating that there is a spectrum. There's a spectrum, and certainly the gentleman you reference has a very kind of tiny, short spectrum. I often think of it as something, as a measurement of how far outside your comfort zone it is. Because certainly people on my trips, I think they would view what they do as solo travel. And I agree, because it is far outside the norm of their comfort zone. They are going with people they don't know. Or maybe they have a sister or a friend with them, but then there's a whole host of people they don't know. They're indulging their curiosity in ways that, aren't pattern behaviors like that, family of four, I don't know, going to Disneyland or something, that's like a repeat trip. And they are opening themselves up to different experiences. And so, and to your point, they are making that decision based on what's in their best interest. So they're coming on a trip, and, the way my trips work is like you could go online, you can look at the itineraries for trips to Iceland or Croatia or New York or wherever it is, and you can opt in based on your interest in that itinerary. And, if someone looks at it and says, I enjoy this idea of going to New York, but I only like half of the things, then you go do your own trip, or I can help you plan your own trip. But you're in the driver's seat of what that trip looks like. And so I think more than anything, for me, that's how I define solo travel, is like, I'm doing what I want to do, whether that means I'm going to go on my own and sit in a retreat in Bali for 6 days and not talk and to anyone at a bar or whatever, whatever that guy might think. Or I'm going to go join a group of strangers that are women coming from all over the country, and we're going to have this shared experience together. Or I'm going to go on my own and let it happen as it's going to happen. So lots of definitions. But I think it all comes back to like, who's driving what that experience looks like. If it's you, it's solo travel.
When you think about the people going on your trips, do you have any stories that you can share, of course, without necessarily calling somebody out or throwing them under the bus in a way, but any experiences that you can share with folks that have had some real aha growth moments?
Yeah, let's see. Without naming names, I'll say some broad strokes, kind of patterns I see. I have observed that the women that join on my trips have really full lives. They're running businesses, running departments, running homes, running families. And often I hear from clients that they show up and some of them haven't even actually read the itinerary. Like they just are excited about Italy and someone thought this was a good company. And so some of the things I see is that when women are on the trips, women of that kind of characteristic often don't create space in their life for themselves on a day-to-day basis. And so anytime I think women kind of create that much space for thoughtful conversation with other adults or other women, or just time with their own thoughts, like there's a lot of things that sometimes shake out from that. Either reflections on what am I going to do about that difficult work situation? What am I going to do about that difficult time I'm at in my marriage or with a friendship? So those kind of questions come out a lot, and they come out in dialogue at dinner or on walks or, wherever we are at. I also see a lot of ahas come out about like, oh my God, this is so cool. Why haven't I not? What have I been doing the last 30 years? Why haven't I been traveling?
Yes.
And so there's lots of conversations around bucket lists and cool destinations and where do I want to go next? And I was got back last week from a trip in Costa Rica. And one of my favorite moments, I would always see this woman like jotting down on her iPhone all of these notes about organizations or books she heard from other people, or just like all these kind of nuggets she was pulling out of conversation that I just had this vision of she's going to go home and sit at her computer and start to Google all these different organizations and kind of use it to kind of, for her to make a new decision about kind of what those everyday days look like.
Absolutely. That sounds fantastic. And I love how you say that they're just living full lives. I think that's a really good way to describe.
Yeah. Sometimes I have a little bit of a reaction. People's like, oh, I'm so busy, which, I get, yeah, lives are full. Lives are busy, you got a lot going on. But I often think of it as full because there is a lot of things on your plate. And now as an entrepreneur, I see how full my life is and think, oh my God, I don't have children yet. Like I don't have dogs. I don't have, things like that to look after. And somehow these women are making it happen and doing it all. And so it's really a joy and privilege to be able to treat these women with very full lives and give them a chance to kind of not be the CEO of their life and let me take over for a week.
That is awesome. Well, and let's be honest about that. The idea that you have taken over the planning for them. They kind of have to do is pack and show up.
Correct.
What does that do? What do you think that does for those folks with such full lives? Because in some cases, they're living those full lives all within things that they have control over.
Totally. So many patterns there. There are always I would say 3 or 4 women on every trip that I can see it from the moment they arrive that it's really hard for them to kind of let loose of control.
Mhm.
And that's because I think they are the only people that I think they just bear that responsibility in their daily life. And so I could tell like they ask me lots of questions and it's almost like they're testing me. I mean, they wouldn't say that, but I think intuitively that's what's going on. Like,
Yep.
do I know what the weather is? Like, do I know kind of what's on the menu? Did I remember to tell that person they can't have shellfish? All these things. And it's always important. Like, I realize that if they're going to eventually relax, I need to win them over in the first 48 hours to prove like, I got it. I know my stuff and I got it. And I have done enough planning on this trip to enable them to just ease into it and relax. And so it takes a couple days, but then, normally that same person 4 days later is asking me like, so what time do we have to be in the lobby in the morning? Like they kind of like completely check out.
I have been that person,
Yes.
by the way.
And it's always like, yes, they relax. I won them over. It's a
Yep.
big win when that happens.
Yep. I have been that person and I love that. And once you know that you can trust that trip leader, it's like, I have nothing else to worry about.
Yep. They just kind of show up and I love it. It's always like one of my favorite moments on this trip.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, in looking at your website, and you'll share more about that when we wrap up the show, but I do see that you have a few places that you just love to go and you go back to a handful of times.
I do. Yes.
Could you pick one and tell us a little bit more about it?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I would say, I'll talk about Switzerland. Switzerland is one of my favorite places. The mountains have always been a huge place of kind of comfort and solace for me. And so that's one of the reasons I love going back every year. And also I love sharing it with clients. I think some of the best trips, I think some of the best trip leaders are people who have a lot of passion around the places you're going and sharing, the people you're introducing to your clients, like revisiting my favorite restaurants. And so I love kind of bringing all that to life. And I think it adds for a richer experience for my clients. But Switzerland in particular is a pretty hiking intense trip compared to some of the other itineraries I lead. We do an overnight trek to this like beautiful kind of rustic mountain lot. I mean, rustic, like they don't have electricity, you eat dinner by candlelight, it's an epic, 10-hour hiking affair to get there, but it's magical and so worth it. And some of my favorite memories that are like ingrained in my mind of waking up and opening these little like Swiss curtains and, opening the window out and then seeing those mountains right in front of you. Like it's just, it's something that feeds my soul a lot. And so I just enjoy kind of bringing people there that will look to the mountains in the same way. So Switzerland, probably every 2 or 3 years, you'll see that on the website for sure.
So with that and with this idea of stretching people out of their comfort zones, when you're taking an intense trip like that, who do you see drawn to something like that and how far are they stretching to do it?
There's a lot of variation there. A couple things that I do that I think is kind of unique in the hosted adventure world is I talk to everyone before they join on an international trip. And certainly, and soon it'll become a practice for all domestic trips as well. And I do it for a couple of reasons. I do it because I actually enjoy getting to know people and getting to know their story a little bit before they get there. It helps me kind of plan around what the kind of collective mindset is of a group on a trip. Also, it gives them a chance to ask questions about the itinerary, about living big, and I can talk about the style of travel with living big because it's a group experience isn't for everyone. And so I like to make sure they understand that. And then I also can go into a lot of detail on the level of activity. So for Switzerland, it's everything about hiking distances and altitude. We're also talking about the level of activity on any given day. And people can decide if that's something they're comfortable saying yes to now. And sometimes there's a good amount of training that has to happen before the trip. And, I'm for Switzerland, for example, every couple months, I'm emailing people about, let's make sure we're training. Let's put our backpacks on. Let's put things in our backpack. Let's walk up the hill.
Okay.
Just
so
to
you're
make sure
not just, ready. You're like giving them the whole experience of it, not just saying like, okay, you signed up for a trip and I hope you're ready by the time we go.
Yeah, no, it's such a traveling in general is a personal experience when you do it with a group of people. And so like I'm in regular contact with clients after they've booked, whether it's about looking at airfare, packing list, all of the pre-trip forms, they all kind of write introductions and upload photos about themselves that I use to share with the rest of the group. And so it really is a group experience, and the experience and relationship I have with them well before they get on that airplane.
I love it. So that sounds like a fabulous type of experience. Now, we don't necessarily want to talk about the bad stuff, but let's be real. Stuff is going to go wrong. So
Oh,
whether
yeah.
it's on a trip that you've hosted or a trip that you've been on, can you give an example of something that just did not go according to plan and what the results were?
Yeah, let's see. On one occasion, I've had a client have their hotel room broken into, which is a terrible, terrible thing
Hmm.
to happen. And I learned so much. It was actually my very first trip, which in some ways I'm glad it happened. If it was going to happen, I'm glad it happened on that first trip because, man, I learned real quick. And it didn't happen as a result of anything I did or didn't do. It was just, unfortunately, bad
Yeah.
people, bad intentions. Um, yeah, let's see. I've had people get sick, not terribly sick, but I've had, oh gosh, I've had people I've hired that, let me think. I've gone to hotels where maybe a month before they've changed ownership and it's too late to change at that point. And then you're like, well, maybe it's not the same rich experience. Gosh, I've had drivers that are kind of kooky sometimes. I've had missed train connections. Yeah, and stuff like that happens. And to be honest, like I always tell my clients that my job as a trip host is to be there just certainly to make sure things come to life the way I've envisioned and planned, but also to help people absorb when plan Bs are necessary. Because reality is going to happen. Like if you're traveling, we're going to miss a train every now and then. We're going to have someone that doesn't speak English, and I've got to hire interpreters on the fly. I mean, all that stuff is going to happen when you're in a foreign environment. So I'm there to help kind of absorb it. But one thing I do often do is maybe every year, maybe every other year, I have this meeting that I love and hate, but it's with my attorney who's I've helped me from the beginning, and we will reflect on things that have happened in the previous year, either things that were new circumstances, new developments, things that go wrong, and we really have a good conversation about how to respond to it, also how to prepare for it, how to try to be proactive. So, there's some protection for both the clients and the business. And anyway, I always leave feeling smarter, but then a little like, dun, dun, dun.
Agreed.
It's
Understood.
it's like one of the non-sexy parts of running a travel business. You got to do it. But yep, those things are going to happen.
I completely understand. And that's sort of just the deal with travel is, and in order to run a business, we do need to have all of our bases covered.
Yep. And I tell you, there seems to be more and more bases every year, but you just got to keep growing, expanding, and getting smarter.
Well, and if we only think about the stuff that's going to be sunshine and roses, we're missing out on some of it too. I think, when things do get turned upside down, it's lessons for us as business owners, but also it's lessons in resilience and positivity
Totally.
and, adaptability and things like that for those on the trips that are important lessons too.
Yep. No, and that's part of it. Cause like my hope is that clients come on my trip and that I hope they are inspired to indulge their curiosity and continue traveling, for the rest of their lives. And, if that's not with me, then that's great. Like that means that they have now the confidence and the comfort to navigate a new country on their own. And so I will make it a point to make sure, say if we get to a train station, that we're looking at the map and I'm explaining this is how I know where to go. And this is how we're going to know to get off. And those are important skills to learn, just as what to do when things go wrong, when you lose your luggage, when you miss your connection, so on and so on.
Well, and, you know, when they're traveling, some people have more of a sense of being relaxed and chill, and other people are probably on more heightened alert. So having a trip host slash, voice of reason and experience and all those kinds of things helps provide some perspective that
Hmm.
is essential. And it's one thing when you're in a country where they speak the same language you do, but when you're traveling in a country where it's a different language, like that can put everybody's nerves and anxiety on high. So,
Oh, totally. Yep. And it's like people need to find comfort in the discomfort. Like it's not always going to be perfect. And so, earlier you can kind of just learn to kind of go with the flow and find ways to bounce back. And if you miss that turn, we'll just take the next one. We'll figure it out. It just takes a little while to, I think, find peace with the fact that it will all work out.
do you find that people are more likely, I'm thinking of the path as they find you. So are they more likely to book another group travel trip with you, or do they then start to get a little bit more adventurous on their own and maybe have you help with itinerary planning?
I kind of see both happen. I have a number of clients that go on a trip with me once a year or every other year. And then, maybe in the off years, they go on maybe trips with their partners or family or friends. And I also have a number of clients that go on trips with me once a year. And then I also plan a trip for them that they take with their family or their friends. And so it's hard to see a lot of distinct patterns because there's a pretty wide spread there. But, most clients, go on a trip. Once they go on a trip, it's not their last trip.
Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about Living Big, where people can find you, and even what trips you have coming up in the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. So all information lives online at livingbig.org. You can also hear about some upcoming trips as well as travel advice and photos in social media. So I'm on both Facebook and Instagram. My handle is at Living Big Travel. Some upcoming trips looking ahead to 2018 will be in Thailand and Kauai. Iceland, Croatia, Italy. New York, Portland, New Orleans. I'm sure I'm leaving one or two out. And then next year, also be researching trips, which is the fun part of the job. So I'm always, adding a few new destinations each year. So next year, I'm looking forward to researching adventures in Vietnam, Peru, and Mexico. So look forward to those new itineraries coming out in 2019. Along with some of those favorites, like Switzerland will be back. Costa Rica will probably be back.
That's fantastic. So you're out there scouting for new trips. You are leading existing trips. Aren't you living a pretty full life yourself?
Life is pretty full. It is right now for sure. I enjoy it. I'm definitely kind of in a growth mode for the next few years. But I'm also exciting news. I'm starting to train women to be trip hosts themselves for Living Big. And so I've had just an amazing experience kind of working with women who love hosting. They love the production of travel. They love travel experiences. They have a lot of passion for the destinations that they're training for. So in the coming years, I'll be able to offer more trips through Living Big, some of which I will host, and other trips will be hosted by other teams of women. But the way I'm approaching that is, everyone will come on a trip to a specific destination, and then that's the destination they are trained to lead. So I'm really taking my time to make sure that it's the right choice, they have the right personality, and they will kind of honor that itinerary and bring it to life in the way that I dream in my mind and hope to always be consistently bringing to life for clients.
That is fantastic. Mary, you have a great story, and I feel like we've just started on the beginning of it, and there's so much more that you're going to be offering through Living Big, which is very exciting.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to chat with you today and to just chat and talk more about travel and solo travel and adventure. So thanks for all you do. I really appreciate it to share these stories.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Wasn't it great to hear the stories that Mary shared with us today? I love how we talked about the spectrum of solo travel and how she really considers the range or degree to which you step out of your comfort zone has a lot to do with the growth that you experience while you're traveling solo. If you love these stories and want to help support Go Solo Live, you can do that by making a small financial contribution to the show at www.patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Go Solo Live. Stop there and show some love. We've reached the end of another episode, but the conversation doesn't have to end there. Find us on Twitter at Go Solo Live, and be sure to reach out to me directly if you'd like to be a guest on the show. Until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.